Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he adjusted the scanner on his utility belt. The dense jungle of Kepler 442b stretched endlessly in every direction, its violet-tinted canopy filtering the light from the binary suns above. As a xenobiologist for the Terran Research Foundation, he had seen plenty of alien worlds, but this one felt different. The air hummed with an energy that made his skin tingle, and every shadow seemed to hide something watching him. His mission was simple: catalog the native fauna and establish preliminary conservation protocols. What he found instead would change everything. The sound hit him first, a high-pitched keening that cut through the jungle's natural symphony like a blade. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively moving to the plasma cutter on his belt. He had learned long ago that unfamiliar sounds on alien worlds usually meant trouble. Following the distressed cries, he pushed through a wall of broad, fan-shaped leaves that sparkled with morning dew. What he saw on the other side made his blood run cold. 3 humans in military-grade combat armor stood around a massive cage made of electromagnetic mesh. Inside, 4 small creatures huddled together, their scales shifting from deep blue to panicked silver. They looked like miniature dragons, each no bigger than a house cat, with delicate wings that fluttered weakly against the energy barriers. Command says these little beauties are worth 50,000 credits each on the black market, one of the poachers said. His voice filtered through his helmet speakers. Rich collectors on Earth go crazy for exotic pets. Just make sure they don't die before we get them to the ship, another replied, poking at the cage with an electric prod. The Dragonlings shrieked and pressed closer together. Marcus felt his jaw clench. He had encountered poachers before, but seeing intelligent creatures treated like merchandise never stopped making him angry. The Dragonlings' large, expressive eyes held an unmistakable intelligence. They weren't just animals, they were thinking, feeling beings. The third poacher, clearly the leader, checked his wrist display. Transport arrives in 20 minutes. Let's get these crates loaded and... A branch snapped under Marcus's foot. All 3 poachers spun toward his hiding spot, weapons already in their hands. Well, well, the leader said, his rifle aimed at Marcus's chest. What do we have here? Another do-gooder scientist? Marcus raised his hand slowly, his mind racing. 3 armed poachers against 1 xenobiologist with basic equipment didn't seem like good odds, but those Dragonlings needed help, and he was the only one who could provide it. I'm just doing research, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. I don't want any trouble. Too bad, the leader replied. You've seen too much. Boys, looks like we've got some cleanup to do. That's when Marcus noticed something the poachers had missed. The jungle around them had gone completely silent. No bird calls, no insect buzzing, no rustling leaves. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. It was the kind of silence that meant an apex predator was nearby. A shadow passed overhead, blotting out the filtered sunlight. The poachers looked up just as something massive crashed through the canopy above them. The Dragon Mother was magnificent and terrifying. Her scales were the color of deep ocean water, shot through with veins of electric blue that pulsed with each heartbeat. She was easily 30 feet long, with wings that spanned twice that when fully extended. Her eyes burned with intelligent fury as she saw her offspring trapped in the electromagnetic cage. Oh, crap, one of the poachers whispered. The dragon's roar shook the trees and sent flocks of alien birds exploding from their perches. She landed with earth-shaking force, her massive claws gouging furrows in the soil. The poachers opened fire immediately, their plasma rifles painting bright streaks across her scales. The shots barely scratched. Marcus threw himself behind a fallen log as the Dragon Mother's tail swept through the air where he had been standing. She wasn't distinguishing between poachers and humans. To her, they were all threats to her young. The leader of the poachers shouted orders, but his voice was lost in the chaos. One of his men screamed as the dragon's jaws closed around his torso. The electromagnetic cage sparked and failed as the dragon's natural bioelectric field interfered with its systems. The Dragonlings tumbled out of their prison, crying for their mother. But they were too weak to fly, and the remaining poachers were trying to recapture them even as their leader fled toward their ship. Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for weeks to come. Instead of running, he sprinted toward the Dragonlings. The Dragon Mother saw him coming and reared back, preparing to incinerate him with her breath weapon. I'm trying to help them, Marcus shouted, though he knew she couldn't understand him. He scooped up 2 of the Dragonlings, their small bodies trembling against his chest. They were warm and surprisingly light, their scales smooth as polished stone. The other two Dragonlings tried to follow him, but they were too exhausted to keep up. A blast of superheated air passed inches from Marcus's head as the Dragon Mother's attack narrowly missed him. He could smell his own singed hair. Behind him he heard the distinctive whine of a ship's engine starting up. The surviving poachers were escaping. Marcus dove behind a cluster of crystal formations, still clutching the two Dragonlings. He could hear the Dragon Mother's heavy footsteps approaching, each one making the ground shake. Her breathing was deep and angry like the sound of a forge bellows. When she rounded the crystal formation, Marcus was ready. He gently placed the two Dragonlings on the ground between himself and their mother. The little creatures immediately tried to crawl toward her, calling out in their musical language. The Dragon Mother stopped, confusion replacing rage in her ancient eyes. She could smell her offspring on this strange creature, but she could also sense that he had not harmed them. Her head tilted slightly as she studied Marcus, her intelligence evaluating this unprecedented situation. Marcus slowly backed away, his hands visible and empty. "I was trying to save them," he said softly. "I'm not your enemy." The Dragon Mother gathered her 4 offspring close to her massive body, her wings creating a protective barrier around them. But her eyes never left Marcus. She was trying to understand why this small, soft creature had risked its life for her young when his own kind had tried to steal them. That understanding would prove to be more complicated than either of them could imagine. Marcus's hands shook as he sealed the emergency shelter's entrance behind him. His portable habitat was designed to withstand most environmental hazards, but he wasn't sure how it would hold up against an angry Dragon Mother. Through the transparent aluminum walls, he could see her massive silhouette moving through the trees, her bioluminescent scales creating an eerie blue glow in the gathering dusk. The two Dragonlings he had accidentally taken during the rescue attempt huddled in the corner of his shelter, their scales flickering between colors he was beginning to recognize as emotional states. Deep blue seemed to mean fear, while silver indicated stress. Right now they were cycling through both colors rapidly. "It's okay, little ones," Marcus whispered, though he wasn't sure if it was true. He had no idea how to care for alien dragon offspring, and their mother clearly thought he had kidnapped them. Marcus activated his suit's medical scanner and carefully examined the Dragonlings. They appeared to be juveniles, probably equivalent to human toddlers based on their proportions and behavior. Both showed signs of malnutrition and dehydration from their time in the poacher's cage. One had a small cut on its wing membrane that needed attention. Working slowly so as not to frighten them further, Marcus prepared a nutrient solution using his emergency medical supplies. The Dragonlings watched him with large, intelligent eyes that reminded him uncomfortably of his nephew back on Earth. When he offered them the solution in a shallow dish, they sniffed it suspiciously before taking tentative sips. Outside, the Dragon Mother's roar echoed through the jungle. Trees crashed as she moved through the undergrowth, her massive bulk unstoppable. Marcus checked his shelter's power levels. At this rate, he had maybe 6 hours before his cloaking field failed, and she would be able to locate him easily. The Dragonlings perked up at their mother's call. Their scales brightening to a hopeful gold color, they pressed against the shelter wall closest to the sound, crying out in response. Their calls were beautiful and musical, nothing like the terrified keening he had heard at the poacher camp. Marcus realized his mistake. By taking the Dragonlings to safety, he had inadvertently separated them from their mother in a way that looked exactly like kidnapping. From her perspective, he was just another human who had stolen her children. His comm device crackled to life. "Research Station 7 to Dr. Chen, please respond." Marcus hesitated before answering. "Chen here. Doctor, we've been monitoring some unusual energy readings from your location. Are you experiencing any difficulties?" Marcus looked at the Dragonlings, who were now investigating his equipment with curious intensity. One of them had discovered his tablet and was gently touching the screen with a tiny claw, apparently fascinated by the changing displays. "I'm dealing with a complex xenobiological situation," Marcus said carefully. "I may need extended time in the field." "Understood, Doctor. Your mission parameters allow for up to 2 weeks of autonomous research. Will that be sufficient?" "I hope so," Marcus replied, watching as the second Dragonling began examining his emergency medical kit. They were incredibly intelligent, clearly trying to understand the strange environment they found themselves in. After signing off, Marcus turned his attention back to his unexpected guests. The injured dragonling was favoring its damaged wing, so he carefully prepared a bioadhesive patch. To his surprise, the creature held perfectly still while he applied the bandage, as if it understood that he was trying to help. The dragonling's scales gradually shifted to a warm amber color that Marcus interpreted as contentment. They had finished the nutrient solution and were now exploring the shelter with the fearless curiosity of young creatures everywhere. One discovered the heating element and curled up against it, purring like a tiny engine. Marcus was beginning to understand their color language. Fear was blue, stress was silver, happiness was gold, contentment was amber, and curiosity seemed to be a shifting pattern of green and purple. It was more complex than any animal communication system he had studied. As night fell completely, the Dragon Mother's searches became more systematic. Marcus could track her movement through the shelter's sensors as she methodically checked every cave, hollow tree, and rock formation in an expanding spiral pattern. She was intelligent enough to understand that he couldn't have gone far while carrying her offspring. The dragonlings had fallen asleep against the heater, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. In sleep, their scales displayed a soft pearl-like sheen that was incredibly beautiful. Marcus found himself thinking about his own family, his sister's children who he hadn't seen in over a year due to his research assignments. These dragonlings were someone's children too. That thought gave him an idea. Marcus carefully recorded the dragonlings' sleeping sounds on his tablet, then played the recording back at low volume. Their mother's response was immediate, a deep thrumming call that vibrated through the shelter walls. The dragonlings stirred but didn't wake, their scales flickering briefly with dream colors before settling back to pearl. The dragon mother was closer now, probably within 100 meters of the shelter. Marcus could feel the ground vibrating with each of her footsteps. She called again, and this time the dragonlings woke up, crying out in response to their mother's voice. Marcus made another decision that went against every survival instinct he possessed. He deactivated the shelter's cloaking field. Within minutes, a massive eye appeared outside the transparent wall, glowing with bioluminescent fury. The Dragon Mother had found them. The dragonlings pressed against the wall, their scales blazing with excited gold as they tried to reach their mother. She could see them clearly now, unharmed and apparently well cared for. Her massive head tilted as she studied the human who sat calmly among her offspring, making no aggressive moves. Marcus slowly stood up and moved to the shelter's control panel. The Dragon Mother's eye tracked his every movement, but she didn't attack. He hesitated for a moment, then began the sequence to open the shelter's entrance. "Dr. Chen, what are you doing?" his AI assistant asked. "Something probably very stupid," Marcus replied. The entrance hissed open, and immediately the dragonlings rushed toward their mother, crying out in their musical language. But instead of leaving, they stopped at the threshold and looked back at Marcus. The injured one, the one he had bandaged, approached him and gently touched his hand with its snout before running to its mother. The Dragon Mother's massive head pushed partway into the shelter, her ancient eyes studying Marcus at close range. He could feel the heat radiating from her scales, see the individual facets in her eyes that reflected the shelter's lights like jewels. This close, he could smell her, like ozone and heated metal with an underlying scent that reminded him of cinnamon. She sniffed at him carefully, her nostrils flaring. Marcus forced himself to remain still, even though every instinct screamed at him to run. She could sense that her offspring had been fed and cared for, that their injuries had been treated. The confusion in her eyes was almost human in its intensity. Then she did something unexpected. She backed out of the shelter and settled down outside, her massive body forming a protective circle around the entrance. The dragonlings scampered back and forth between their mother and Marcus, as if trying to bridge the gap between two worlds they had come to trust. Marcus realized he was no longer a kidnapper in her eyes. But he wasn't sure what he was becoming instead, and that uncertainty would soon prove to be dangerous for all of them. Marcus woke to the sound of rumbling thunder, but when he checked his weather sensors, the skies were clear. The sound was coming from outside his shelter. The Dragon Mother was growling, her massive form tense with alertness. The dragonlings had gone completely silent, their scales shifting to a dark blue that Marcus now recognized as extreme fear. Through the shelter's walls, he could see movement in the jungle. Multiple heat signatures were approaching, and they weren't native wildlife. The surviving poachers had returned and they had brought reinforcements. "There she is," came a voice through Marcus's communication interceptor. "The mother dragon. Command wants her alive if possible. A breeding pair would be worth millions." Marcus felt his stomach drop. These weren't just poachers anymore. They were professional exotic animal traffickers with military-grade equipment. Through his scope, he could see at least 8 armored figures moving through the trees, carrying weapons that looked powerful enough to take down a dragon. The dragon mother's head snapped toward the shelter. She could sense the approaching danger, and her protective instincts were warring with her confusion about Marcus. Her eyes met his through the transparent wall, and for a moment, he saw something that looked almost like a request for help. Then the first tranquilizer dart hit her neck. The dragon mother roared in fury and pain, her massive tail sweeping through the trees as she tried to locate her attackers. The dragonlings inside the shelter cried out in distress, their small voices almost drowned out by their mother's rage. "Target acquired. Deploy the neural nets," the lead poacher commanded. Marcus watched in horror as energy nets shot out from multiple directions, wrapping around the dragon mother's wings and legs. She thrashed against them, her bioluminescent scales flaring brighter with each struggling movement. But the nets were designed specifically for large alien predators. Another tranquilizer dart found its mark, then another. The dragon mother's movements began to slow, her roars becoming weaker. But her eyes remained fixed on the shelter where her offspring huddled in terror. Marcus couldn't stand it any longer. He grabbed his plasma cutter and emergency flare gun, then opened the shelter's entrance. The dragonlings tried to follow him, but he gently pushed them back inside. "Stay here," he told them, knowing they couldn't understand his words but hoping they would understand his tone. "I'll bring her back." The poachers were so focused on subduing the dragon mother that they didn't notice Marcus until he was almost on top of them. His first plasma blast took out their net generator, causing the energy restraints to flicker and weaken. The dragon mother immediately began struggling with renewed strength. "We've got company," one of the poachers shouted, spinning to face Marcus with his rifle raised. Marcus dove behind a fallen tree as plasma bolts sizzled past his head. He wasn't a soldier, but desperation and righteous anger made him bold. His second shot disabled one of the poacher's weapons, sending the man diving for cover. The dragon mother, partially freed from the nets, reared up and breathed a stream of superheated plasma that turned 2 trees into instant torches. The poachers scattered, their disciplined formation breaking apart as they realized their prey was no longer helpless. "Fall back to position 2, the leader ordered. "Deploy the sonic disruptors." Marcus had never heard of sonic disruptors, but the name sounded ominous. When the devices activated, he understood why. The high-frequency sound waves were designed to disorient large alien creatures, and the dragon mother staggered as the invisible assault hit her. But the sonic disruptors affected more than just their intended target. The dragonlings in the shelter began crying out in agony, their small bodies convulsing as the sound waves penetrated the shelter's walls. Their scales flashed painful red, a color Marcus had never seen before but instinctively understood meant extreme distress. The dragon mother heard her offspring's cries of pain, and something primal and terrible awakened in her eyes. The tranquilizer drugs in her system couldn't override millions of years of evolution, telling her to protect her young at any cost. Her roar, this time, was different, deeper, more resonant, filled with a rage that seemed to shake the very air. The remaining energy nets snapped like spiderwebs as she flexed muscles that most creatures only used in life-or-death situations. Marcus felt the hair on his arms stand up as the air around the dragon mother began to crackle with bioelectric energy. She was building up to something, an attack he had only read about in theoretical xenobiology papers. "Everyone down," Marcus shouted, though he doubted the poachers would listen to him. The dragon mother's entire body flashed brilliant white as she released a massive electromagnetic pulse. Every piece of electronic equipment within 100 meters died instantly. The poachers' armor went dark, their weapons stopped working, and even Marcus's shelter lost power. In the sudden silence that followed, broken only by the crackle of dying electronics, the dragon mother swayed on her feet. The effort of generating that much bioelectric energy while fighting off tranquilizers had pushed her to her limits. The poachers, their high-tech advantage suddenly gone, began retreating through the jungle with whatever primitive weapons they could salvage. But their leader wasn't giving up so easily. "This isn't over," he shouted as he disappeared into the undergrowth. "That dragon is worth too much to walk away from." Marcus approached the dragon mother cautiously. She was breathing heavily, her scales flickering with exhaustion colors, pale yellows and grays that spoke of a creature pushed beyond its endurance. When she saw him coming, she tried to rear up defensively but stumbled instead. The Dragonlings burst out of the powerless shelter, running to their mother with cries of concern. They pressed against her massive foreleg, their scales shifting to worried oranges and anxious purples. She lowered her great head to nuzzle them gently, reassuring herself that they were unharmed. Marcus found himself in an impossible situation. The dragon mother was clearly in no condition to protect herself or her offspring if the poachers returned with non-electronic weapons. But how could he possibly help a creature that was 30 feet long and weighed several tons? The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the dragonlings, the one he had bandaged, approached him and tugged gently at his pants leg with its tiny claws. When Marcus looked down, the small creature pointed toward its mother, then back at Marcus, its scales shifting to colors he was beginning to recognize as urgency and hope. The dragonling was asking for his help. Marcus looked up at the dragon mother, whose ancient eyes were watching this interaction with what appeared to be amazement. Her offspring was actively seeking assistance from a human, something that should have been impossible given the natural hostility between their species. "Okay," Marcus said softly, addressing them both. "I'll try to help, but we need to get out of here before they come back." The dragon mother tilted her massive head, studying Marcus with an expression that seemed almost thoughtful. She couldn't understand his words, but she could sense his intentions. Slowly, carefully, she lowered herself to the ground in what Marcus realized was an invitation. His mind raced as he considered the implications. If he helped the dragon mother and her offspring escape, he would be abandoning his research mission and potentially making himself a target of the poacher organization. But if he walked away now, he would be condemning an intelligent creature and her children to a life of captivity and exploitation. The choice, when he really thought about it, wasn't a choice at all. Marcus gathered his essential equipment and climbed carefully onto the dragon mother's back, the dragonling scrambling up beside him. Her scales were warm and surprisingly smooth, providing natural handholds between the larger plates. She rose slowly to her feet, testing his weight and balance before spreading her massive wings. As they lifted off into the violet sky of Kepler 442b, Marcus caught a glimpse of the poachers' camp in the distance. They were already regrouping, planning their next move. This wasn't the end of their pursuit. It was just the beginning. But for the first time since this whole adventure began, Marcus felt like he and the dragon family might actually have a chance. Flying on the back of an alien dragon turned out to be nothing like the stories Marcus had read as a child. The dragon mother's flight was smooth and powerful, but the wind at altitude made his eyes water, and his emergency shelter's scattered equipment feel insignificant in his pack. The dragonlings pressed close to both him and their mother, their scales displaying colors he was learning to interpret as excitement mixed with concern. Below them, the jungle of Kepler 442b stretched endlessly, a carpet of violet and green that hid countless wonders and dangers. Marcus tried to use his handheld scanner to map their route, but the device was still recovering from the electromagnetic pulse the dragon mother had unleashed. Most of his equipment was functioning at reduced capacity or not at all. After an hour of flight, the dragon mother began to descend toward a series of dramatic cliffs that rose from the jungle like ancient stone fingers. Hidden among the peaks, Marcus could see cave openings that glowed with the same bioluminescent blue as the dragon mother's scales. This was her home territory. The landing was gentler than Marcus had expected. The dragon mother touched down on a broad ledge outside the largest cave, her massive wings folding against her sides as she lowered herself to allow Marcus and the dragonlings to dismount. The little ones immediately scampered toward the cave entrance, their happy golden scales announcing their joy at being home. Marcus climbed down carefully, his legs shaky from the long flight. He had planned to say goodbye here, to leave the dragon family safely in their home and somehow make his way back to civilization. But as he looked around the barren ledge and considered the miles of hostile jungle below, he realized that plan had some serious flaws. The dragon mother seemed to understand his predicament. She made a low rumbling sound and gestured toward the cave with her massive head. The invitation was clear, even across the language barrier. Inside the cave, Marcus discovered a world he could never have imagined. The walls were covered with crystalline formations that pulsed with soft light, creating a natural illumination system that was both beautiful and functional. The cave system was vast, with tunnels branching off in multiple directions. But what captured his attention most were the other dragons. There were dozens of them, ranging from ancient adults whose scales had darkened to deep indigo, to juveniles barely larger than the Dragonlings he had helped rescue. They watched Marcus with curious but wary eyes, their scales displaying a rainbow of emotions as they tried to process the unprecedented sight of a human in their sanctuary. The Dragonlings ran to greet what were obviously other family members, siblings, cousins, perhaps aunts and uncles. Their reunion was a symphony of musical calls and flashing scales that spoke of joy, relief, and excitement. Marcus found himself smiling despite the complexity of his situation. An elderly dragon, larger even than the mother, approached with slow, dignified steps. His scales were so dark they seemed to absorb light, but veins of silver ran through them like lightning frozen in stone. When he looked at Marcus, the human felt as if he was being examined by something incredibly ancient and wise. The old dragon and the mother began what could only be described as a conversation. Their communication involved not just sounds, but also color displays, body language, and even changes in the electromagnetic fields Marcus could detect with his partially functional scanner. It was a complex, multi-layered language that put human communication to shame. After several minutes of this exchange, the old dragon approached Marcus directly. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, but to Marcus's amazement, some of the sounds were almost recognizable as human language. "You help children," the old dragon said, his pronunciation strange but understandable. Marcus nearly fell over in shock. "You can speak human language?" The old dragon's eyes crinkled in what might have been amusement. "Some words. Trade with humans. Long ago, before bad humans come, trade." Marcus's mind raced. "Your people have had contact with humans before?" "Long time. Good humans bring gifts, knowledge. We share knowledge too. Then bad humans come. Take children. Take mates. We hide." Marcus began to understand the bigger picture. The dragons weren't just intelligent animals. They were a sophisticated civilization that had once had peaceful contact with human explorers. The poachers hadn't just been stealing exotic pets. They had been kidnapping members of a sentient species. "The poachers," Marcus said. "They're not the first to take your people?" The old dragon's scales flickered with sad colors, deep blues and muted grays. "Many taken. Families broken. We fight, but humans have weapons we do not understand." The mother dragon approached and began another complex communication with the elder. Marcus caught some of it. She was describing the rescue, the care Marcus had provided to her offspring, and his decision to help them escape. The elder listened carefully, his ancient eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "She says you risk life for children not your own," the elder said finally. "This is rare among humans we have known." Marcus felt a flush of shame at the implication. Not all humans are like the poachers. Some of us believe in protecting those who can't protect themselves. "You prove this with actions, not words," the elder replied. "But now you are in danger. Bad humans will seek you. They will think you know where we hide." That was a problem Marcus hadn't fully considered. By helping the dragon family escape, he had made himself a target. The poachers would assume he knew the location of the dragon settlement, making him valuable as either an informant or an example to others who might interfere with their operations. "I won't tell them anything," Marcus said firmly, "even if they find me." The elder dragon studied him for a long moment. "We believe this, but we also do not abandon friends to enemies." The Dragonlings had been listening to this conversation, and now they approached Marcus with their scales displaying colors he was learning to recognize as affection and loyalty. The injured one, his wing now fully healed, climbed onto Marcus's lap and began purring like a tiny engine. "They have accepted you as family," the mother dragon said, speaking for the first time in broken but clear human language. "In our culture, this creates obligations." Marcus looked around at the dragon community. Seeing the careful way they watched over each other, the obvious bonds between family groups, the respect shown to the elders, it was a complex society built on cooperation and mutual protection. qualities that seem to be in short supply among the humans currently on this planet. What kind of obligations? Marcus asked. The elder dragon's scales flickered with what Marcus was beginning to recognize as amusement. The same obligations family has always carried. To protect, to teach, to share burdens. You're offering to make me part of your community? You already are part of our community, the mother dragon corrected. The question is whether you will accept the responsibilities that come with belonging. Marcus thought about his research mission, his career with the Terran Research Foundation, his life back on Earth. Then he looked at the Dragonlings, who were watching him with eyes full of trust and hope. He thought about the poachers still hunting this peaceful people, and the knowledge he possessed that could help protect them. When he looked up, he found every dragon in the cave watching him expectantly. Their scales displayed a spectrum of hopeful colors, golden yellows, warm oranges, bright greens. They weren't just offering him sanctuary, they were offering him a purpose. If I stay, Marcus said carefully, I'll need to contact my research station. Tell them I'm extending my mission parameters. And I'll need access to my equipment to help set up better defenses against the poachers. The elder dragon's scales blazed with approval. Then you accept? Marcus reached out and gently touched the dragonling in his lap, feeling the warm smoothness of its scales and the trust in its contented purr. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. I accept, he said, but we're going to need a plan. The poachers won't give up easily and they'll be back with better equipment. The elder dragon's expression turned serious, his scales shifting to determined reds and focused blues. Then we prepare for war. Marcus spent 3 days learning the dragon's defensive systems and helping to improve them with human technology. The dragon caves were naturally defensible, but the elder dragons had also developed sophisticated early warning networks using the planet's unique crystalline formations. The crystals could transmit vibrations and electromagnetic signatures across vast distances, creating a communication network that spanned the entire continent. What the dragons lacked was experience with modern human military technology. Marcus worked with their engineers, dragons whose scales shimmered with the focused intensity of brilliant minds, to adapt his remaining equipment into better detection systems. His scanner's electromagnetic sensors could be integrated with their crystal network to identify approaching aircraft and vehicles long before they became a direct threat. The Dragonlings had become his constant companions, following him everywhere as he worked. Their mother, who had introduced herself as Zarethka, a name that roughly translated to she who guards the storm, often joined these work sessions. Her intelligence was remarkable. She grasped complex technical concepts faster than some human engineers Marcus had worked with. Your people's technology is aggressive, she observed as Marcus explained how human plasma weapons functioned, built for destroying rather than creating. Not all of it, Marcus replied, adjusting the crystal resonance frequency on their new detection grid. Humans can create amazing things when we're not fighting each other. The bad humans who hunt us, they represent all humans to our people, Zarethka said sadly. You are the first to show us different. That conversation was interrupted by an urgent thrumming from the crystal network. The elder dragon, Vorthnul, approached with his scales flashing warning colors. Ships approach, he announced. Many ships. More than before. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he checked their new detection system. The display showed at least 12 aircraft converging on their position from multiple directions. The poachers had brought everything they had for this assault. How did they find us? Marcus asked. But even as he spoke, he realized the answer. His research station's communication protocols included automatic location tracking. When he had contacted them to extend his mission, he had inadvertently given away their position. It doesn't matter how, Zarethka said. Her scales shifting to the determined reds and focused blues that Marcus had learned meant battle readiness. What matters is that we are prepared. The dragon community mobilized with impressive efficiency. The young and elderly retreated to the deepest caves, while the adult dragons took up defensive positions throughout the cliff face. Marcus watched in amazement as their scales shifted to match the surrounding rock, creating camouflage so perfect he could barely tell where the dragons ended and the stone began. But perfect camouflage wouldn't be enough against the weapons he could see on the approaching ships. The poachers had brought military-grade assault craft, armed with sensors that could detect heat signatures and electromagnetic activity. They weren't planning to capture dragons this time. They were planning to eliminate the threat to their operation permanently. Fourth Null, Marcus said urgently. Your people need to get deeper into the caves. These weapons can blast through solid rock. The elder dragon's eyes glowed with ancient fury. This is our home. We do not flee from thieves and murderers. You're not fleeing, Marcus explained. You're surviving. There's a difference. The first explosions shook the cliff face as the assault ships opened fire. Chunks of stone rained down into the jungle below, and the crystal communication network screamed with harmonics as the structures were damaged by the concussive blasts. Marcus grabbed his remaining equipment and ran for a defensive position near the main cave entrance. If the poachers wanted to capture dragons, they would have to come through the caves eventually, and he planned to make that as expensive as possible. Zareth Ka landed beside him, her massive form providing cover from the continuing bombardment. My offspring are safe in the deep caves, she said, but many of our people refuse to retreat further. Then we hold the line here, Marcus replied, checking his plasma cutter's charge. It wasn't much of a weapon against military armor, but it was what he had. The assault ships landed on the broader ledges, disgorging teams of heavily armed soldiers. These weren't the same poachers from before. These were professional mercenaries with military training and equipment. Their armor was newer, their weapons more sophisticated, and their movements coordinated with the precision of a special forces unit. Deploy sonic scramblers, their commander ordered. I want those dragons disoriented before we move in. The sonic devices they activated were more powerful than the ones used in the jungle. The harmonics they generated were specifically tuned to disrupt dragon communication and navigation, turning their greatest advantages against them. Marcus watched in horror as several dragons stumbled and fell, their bioluminescent scales flickering chaotically. But the mercenaries had made one critical miscalculation. They assumed they were facing simple animals driven by instinct rather than an intelligent civilization, capable of tactical thinking. Vorth Null's roar echoed from the deepest caves. But it wasn't a cry of pain or distress. It was a command, transmitted through the remaining crystal network to every dragon in the cliff system. The response was immediate and coordinated. The dragons had been holding back, using only a fraction of their abilities. Now they unleashed the full power of their species. Bioelectric discharges lit up the cave system like lightning, as dozens of dragons simultaneously released electromagnetic pulses. The mercenaries' electronic equipment failed in cascading waves, their sophisticated weapons reduced to expensive clubs. Fall back to backup positions, the commander shouted, but his communications were dead. The sonic scramblers had been fried along with everything else. In the sudden electronic silence, the dragons' natural advantages became overwhelming. They knew every tunnel and crevice in the cliff face, could see perfectly in the bioluminescent light of their own scales, and could communicate through harmonics that the humans couldn't detect or interfere with. Marcus found himself in the middle of a battle unlike anything in human military history. Dragons flowed through the caves like liquid shadow, appearing suddenly to strike and disappearing before the mercenaries could respond. Their scales provided perfect camouflage, and their bioelectric abilities could disable weapons and armor at close range. But the mercenaries were professionals, and they adapted quickly. Teams began using primitive weapons, kinetic firearms, explosive charges, even melee weapons that couldn't be disabled by electromagnetic pulses. The battle became a grinding, brutal affair, as both sides took casualties. Marcus was treating an injured dragon when Zareth Ka appeared beside him, her scales showing damage from plasma burns. Too many of them, she said grimly. They sacrificed their people like tools, not caring for losses. That was the difference, Marcus realized. The dragons fought to protect their community, accepting losses only when absolutely necessary. The mercenaries fought for profit, treating their own people as expendable resources. It gave the humans a tactical advantage that was both ruthless and effective. The tide of battle was turning against the dragons when something unexpected happened. The crystal network began resonating with a frequency Marcus had never heard before. Deeper, more powerful, carrying harmonics that seemed to shake the very foundations of the mountain. What is that? Marcus asked. Zareth Ka's scales flickered with something that looked like hope mixed with awe. The great call, she whispered. Vorth Null summons the ancestors. At first Marcus didn't understand what she meant. Then the shadows in the deepest caves began to move, and he realized that the cliff system contained more than just the dragons he had seen. Ancient forms emerged from passages that seemed too small to contain them, their scales so dark they seemed to absorb light itself. These were the eldest of the dragon race, creatures so old they had become legend among their own people. The mercenaries' commander saw them coming and made the only rational decision available to him. "All units fall back to the ships. Full retreat." But as his forces attempted to withdraw, they discovered that retreat was no longer an option. During the battle, other dragon communities from across the continent had been responding to the great call. The sky outside the caves was now filled with wings, as dragons who had hidden from humanity for generations emerged to defend their threatened kin. The remaining mercenary ships lifted off desperately, but they were vastly outnumbered. Marcus watched through the cave entrance as the brief air battle played out overhead, feeling a mixture of awe and terror at the raw power being displayed. When the last mercenary ship disappeared over the horizon, whether destroyed or fled, Marcus couldn't tell. An unusual silence fell over the cliff face. The immediate threat was over, but both sides knew this was far from the end of the conflict. Zareth Ka settled beside Marcus, her breathing heavy with exhaustion. "Your people will send more," she said. "Stronger weapons. Larger armies." Marcus nodded grimly. "Probably. But now we know what we're really dealing with. This isn't just about stopping poachers anymore. This is about two species learning to coexist." The Dragonlings emerged from the deep caves running to. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true scope of the conflict Marcus had stumbled into. As he helped treat the wounded dragons using a combination of human medical techniques and dragon healing methods, Zareth Ka shared intelligence that changed everything he thought he knew about the situation. "The bad humans," she explained while her scales glowed with the soft bioluminescence that aided in healing, "they do not work alone. They serve others, humans with great power who collect our people for purposes we do not understand." Marcus paused in his work, bandaging a young dragon's wing. "What do you mean, collect your people?" Forthnol approached, his ancient scales bearing new scars from the battle. "We have ways of tracking our lost ones," he said gravely. "Many are not killed. They are taken to places far from here, kept alive but imprisoned, used for experiments." The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been thinking of the poachers as criminals seeking exotic pets for wealthy collectors. The reality was far worse. They were supplying dragons to researchers who saw them as laboratory specimens rather than sentient beings. "How many?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Over 300 of our people taken across 50 seasons," Forthnol replied. "Mates separated from their bonds. Children stolen from their families. Elders captured for their knowledge." Marcus felt sick. As a xenobiologist, he understood the scientific value of studying an intelligent alien species. But conducting experiments on sentient beings without their consent was a violation of every ethical principle he believed in. "I need to contact my research station," Marcus said urgently. "If the Terran Research Foundation is involved in this, or if they know about it, I can try to—" "Your people already know," Zareth Ka interrupted gently. "The ships that attacked us, they carried the same markings as the ones you arrived in." Marcus stared at her in shock. "That's impossible. The TRF has strict protocols about contact with intelligent species." But even as he said it, Marcus realized how naive that sounded. The Terran Research Foundation was funded by corporations and governments with their own agendas. If dragon specimens were valuable enough, there would always be people willing to bend or break the rules to obtain them. His handheld communicator crackled to life, interrupting his dark thoughts. "Dr. Chen, this is Research Station 7. Please respond immediately." Marcus hesitated, looking at the dragons around him. If his own organization was involved in their persecution, then reporting his location could bring another attack. But if there was any chance of stopping this from the inside, he had to try. "This is Chen," he replied carefully. "Doctor, we've been monitoring some concerning energy readings from your position. There are reports of military action in your area. Are you in immediate danger?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Marcus noticed that they were asking about military action, not about dragons. They already knew what was happening. "I'm safe for now," Marcus said, "but I need to speak with Director Hawkins immediately about the ethical implications of our research parameters." There was a long pause before the response came. "Dr. Chen, Director Hawkins is currently unavailable. We're dispatching a rescue team to your location. Please activate your emergency beacon so we can extract you safely." Marcus looked at Zarethka, who was listening intently despite not understanding the human language. Her scales were showing the colors he had learned meant suspicion and concern. "Negative on the emergency beacon," Marcus replied. "I'm conducting vital research that requires extended field time. I'll contact you again when I'm ready for extraction." "Doctor, that's not acceptable. Your safety is our primary concern. Activate your beacon immediately, or we'll be forced to triangulate your position using your communication signal." The threat was clear, and Marcus realized he had walked into a trap. By contacting the research station, he had given them everything they needed to locate the dragon settlement. Within hours, another military force would arrive, but this time they wouldn't be mercenaries working for profit. They would be official forces with government backing and unlimited resources. Marcus turned off his communicator and looked at the assembled dragons. "We need to evacuate now." Forthnul's scales flickered with resigned understanding. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 hours before they arrive in force," Marcus estimated. "But this is just the beginning. If my government is involved, they'll keep coming until they get what they want. Then we do not run," Zarethka said firmly. "We end this. How?" Marcus asked. "We can't fight an entire military organization." Zarethka exchanged a complex communication with Vorthnul, their scales displaying colors and patterns that spoke of ancient knowledge and desperate plans. When they turned back to Marcus, their expressions were grim but determined. "There is a way," Vorthnul said slowly, "but it requires trust between our peoples that has never existed before." "What kind of trust?" "The kind that allows one species to hold the survival of another in their hands," Zarethka replied. "Marcus Chen, would your people listen if they knew the truth about us? About what we really are?" Marcus frowned. "What do you mean, what you really are? You're an intelligent alien species with advanced biotechnology and—" "We are gardeners," Vorthnul interrupted. "This planet, every plant, every crystal formation, every weather pattern, it is all our work. We have been terraforming Kepler 442b for over 10,000 of your years, preparing it." "Preparing it for what?" Zarethka's scales shifted to colors Marcus had never seen before, deep purples and silver that seemed to pulse with significance. "For your people. Humans. We have been creating a refuge world where your species could survive when your home planet becomes uninhabitable." Marcus felt the world shift around him. That's impossible. How could you know about Earth's environmental problems? How could you plan for something like that? "We are not the first intelligent species to face extinction," Vorthnul explained. "The crystals in our caves, they are not natural. They are archives containing the knowledge of 12 civilizations that came before us. All of them learned too late that intelligence alone is not enough to survive the universe. Cooperation between species is the only path to long-term survival. You've been watching us," Marcus realized, "studying human civilization. For 300 of your years," Zarethka confirmed. "We know about your wars, your pollution, your climate disasters. We have seen other species follow the same path. Without intervention, your people have perhaps 50 of your years before your homeworld becomes uninhabitable." Marcus staggered as the implications hit him. The dragons weren't just victims of human greed. They were humanity's potential saviors, and his own species was destroying their only hope for long-term survival. "The people taking your species," Marcus said urgently. "Do they know about this? About what you're doing for humanity?" "Some suspect," Vorthnul replied. "They see our biotechnology, our ability to reshape environments. They want to control it, to use it for profit rather than preservation. But if the general population knew, if I could get this information to the right people—" "Your people would face a choice," Zarethka said. "Continue on their current path and face extinction alone, or learn to work with us toward mutual survival." Marcus thought about the bureaucrats and politicians who controlled human space policy, about the corporations that saw every new world as a resource to be exploited. The idea of them making such a choice based on long-term survival rather than short-term profit seemed almost laughably naive. But then he looked at the Dragonlings, who were watching this conversation with intelligent eyes that held hope, despite everything they had endured. He thought about Zarethka's willingness to trust him with her offspring, about Vorthnul's decision to share knowledge that could reshape the relationship between their species. There's a way to force that choice, Marcus said slowly, but it's dangerous for all of us. Tell us, Zarethka said. Her scales showing the focused attention he had learned meant complete commitment. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would either save two species or doom them both. We broadcast everything. The truth about what you're doing, about what the poachers are really after, about what humanity stands to lose if we destroy this alliance. We send it on every frequency to every human colony and research station in this sector. And if your leaders try to suppress this information, Forthnall asked. Then we make it impossible to suppress, Marcus replied grimly. We give it to everyone at once and let the human population decide for themselves whether they want a future or just profit. Zareth Ka's scales blazed with determined colors. And if they choose profit over survival? Marcus looked at the dragon family that had accepted him, at the ancient civilization that had spent centuries preparing a refuge for his species, at the choice between hope and greed that would define both their futures. Then at least we'll have given them the chance to choose, he said, Ma Rekern. And some of them, enough of them, I hope, will choose wisely. Simultaneously, carried by the Dragon Crystal Network to relay stations across the continent and then beamed to every human ship, station, and colony within 100 light-years, Marcus stood in the main cave chamber, watching as dozens of dragons channeled their bioelectric energy through the crystalline amplifiers, their scales blazing with the effort required to punch through any attempt at signal jamming. The message was simple, but devastating. Video evidence of the dragon civilization, documented proof of their terraforming activities, scientific data about Earth's declining habitability, and a detailed account of the systematic capture and exploitation of sentient beings by organizations claiming to represent humanity's best interests. Transmission complete, Vorthnul announced, his ancient voice carrying exhaustion but determination. Now we wait to see how your people respond. They didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, Marcus's communicator was flooded with incoming signals from across human space. Colonial governors, corporate executives, military commanders, and research directors, all demanding explanations, denials, or confirmations. The most telling response came from his own research station. Dr. Chen, Director Hawkins's voice crackled with barely controlled fury. You have committed an act of treason against the human species. Stand down immediately and surrender yourself for debriefing. Or face the consequences. Marcus looked at Zareth Ka, who was monitoring the human communications with equipment they had rapidly adapted for the purpose. Her scales showed colors he now recognized as grim amusement. Your leader is angry that his secrets are exposed, she observed. But listen to the other voices. She was right. Behind the official condemnations and threats, Marcus could hear something else. Scientists asking for verification of the terraforming data. Colonists demanding to know why they hadn't been told about the dragon civilization. Ordinary humans expressing outrage at the treatment of sentient beings. The truth was spreading faster than any official attempt to suppress it. The most significant response came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenobiologist who had trained Marcus years earlier, appeared on a live broadcast from the University of New Geneva. If the data in this transmission is accurate, she said, addressing a packed auditorium, then we are not just looking at first contact with an alien species. We are looking at first contact with a species that has been actively working to ensure humanity's survival. The ethical implications of our response will define us as a civilization. That broadcast was picked up and retransmitted across human space, sparking debates on every inhabited world. The dragon revelation had become impossible to ignore or suppress, but the immediate crisis was far from over. Marcus's scanner detected incoming ships, a full military squadron approaching fast. This time the forces coming for them had official government backing, and the firepower to obliterate the entire cliff face if necessary. 12 heavy assault ships, approaching from multiple vectors, Marcus reported to the assembled dragons. They'll be here in 2 hours. The dragon community had spent the time since their broadcast preparing for this possibility. The great chambers echoed with activity as families prepared to evacuate to deeper, more defensible positions. But not everyone was fleeing. The young and the old will retreat to the deep sanctuaries, Vorthnul announced. But the warriors will remain. If humanity chooses war over cooperation, we will not make it easy for them. Marcus felt a chill of dread. There has to be another way. If we fight, both species lose. The dragons get wiped out and humanity loses its only chance for long-term survival. Then what do you propose? Zareth Ka asked. Her own dragonlings pressed close to her sides. They had grown visibly in the weeks since the first rescue, their scales now showing complex color patterns that spoke of developing intelligence. Marcus stared at his scanner display, watching the approaching ships. An idea was forming. Dangerous, probably suicidal, but potentially game-changing. I'm going to meet them, he said. Alone, in open space where they can't claim I'm under duress or being manipulated. They will capture you, Zareth Ka protested. Use you as a weapon against us. Maybe, Marcus admitted. But they might also listen. And if I'm broadcasting live while we talk, the entire human population will be watching. They'll have to justify their actions to billions of people who now know the truth. Vorthnal's scales flickered with ancient wisdom. You would sacrifice yourself for the possibility of peace between our peoples. You've been sacrificing for my people for 300 years, Marcus replied. It's time for a human to return the favor. An hour later, Marcus found himself sitting in a small atmospheric craft provided by the dragons, floating in space between the incoming human fleet and the planet below. Zareth Ka had insisted on coming with him, despite the obvious risks. Her massive form filled most of the craft's passenger space, but her presence provided a comfort Marcus hadn't expected. Unknown craft. This is Admiral Torres of the TRS Dauntless, came the transmission from the lead battleship. You are ordered to surrender immediately for processing. Admiral, this is Dr. Marcus Chen, xenobiologist with the Terran Research Foundation, Marcus replied, activating his suit's video transmission. I'm broadcasting live on all frequencies. The entire human species is watching this conversation. There was a long pause before Torres responded. Dr. Chen, you have violated numerous laws and regulations. Stand down and prepare to be taken into custody. Admiral, with respect, the only thing I've violated is the conspiracy of silence around what's happening on this planet. Marcus said, I'm sitting here next to a representative of a species that has spent centuries preparing a refuge world for humanity. They're offering us a chance at survival, and your response is to send a military fleet to destroy them. The creature next to you is a dangerous alien predator, Torres replied. It has attacked human personnel and poses a significant threat to colonial security. Zareth Ka spoke for herself, her words carefully chosen and clearly pronounced, despite the difficulty of human language for her vocal structure. Admiral Torres, I am mother to children your people tried to steal. I am daughter to elders your people have captured and tortured. I am guardian of a world your people need for survival. Which of us is the true threat? The transmission was silent for nearly a minute. When Torres spoke again, his voice carried a different tone, uncertainty where there had been absolute confidence. Dr. Chen, are you claiming these creatures are sentient? I'm not claiming anything, Admiral. I'm stating a documented fact. The dragons are not just sentient. They're more advanced than we are in biotechnology, environmental engineering, and long-term planning. They've been terraforming this world as a refuge for humanity, and we've been repaying them by stealing their children. Marcus could see other ships in the fleet, their weapon systems powered but not yet locked on target. He knew that dozens of human commanders were listening to this conversation, trying to decide between their orders and their consciences. The broadcast we sent contains detailed evidence of everything I'm telling you, Marcus continued. Scientific data, cultural records, proof of the terraforming project. Are you really going to ignore all of that and commit genocide against a species that's trying to save us? Another voice joined the transmission, younger, uncertain. Admiral, this is Captain Reyes on the Defiant. We're receiving thousands of messages from across human space. Colonial assemblies are demanding we stand down. The Senate is calling for emergency hearings. Maintain formation, Torres ordered, but his voice lacked conviction. Zareth Ka moved closer to the transmission pickup, her scales glowing with soft, non-threatening colors. Admiral Torres, you have children, yes? I can hear it in your voice, the love, the protectiveness. I have children too. 4 little ones who trust me to keep them safe from those who would harm them. We are not so different, your people and mine. Ma'am, I mean honored dragon, Torres said, stumbling over the unprecedented protocol. My orders are clear. You represent a potential threat to human colonies in this sector. And my purpose is clear, Zareth Ka replied. I represent hope for both our species. The choice is yours, Admiral. Will you choose fear or cooperation? The fleet held position for another hour as transmissions flew back and forth between the ships and their commanders on distant worlds. Marcus watched the tactical display, knowing that his life and the future of two species hung in the balance of whatever decision was being made in the corridors of human power. Finally, Torres's voice returned to the channel. "Dr. Chen, I'm receiving new orders from Fleet Command. We are to establish a defensive perimeter around this system and await the arrival of a diplomatic mission." Marcus felt a wave of relief so intense it left him dizzy. "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me yet, Doctor. The politicians and scientists are coming, and they'll want answers to a lot of very difficult questions. But for now, no one is shooting at anyone." 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Kepler station, watching as human colonists worked alongside Dragon engineers to expand the terraforming operation. The integration hadn't been easy. There had been protests, political battles, and more than a few attempts to restart the capture operations. But the truth, once revealed, had proven